I have 2 watercolor card ideas to stretch your creativity using stencils. Welcome back to another Take 2 with Therese at Altenew. I've got 5 tips to share with you and a bonus tip. We're going to be using layering stencils a little bit differently today. We're going to do 2 different kinds of watercoloring through them. My first tip today is to use watercolor cardstock. This cardstock has a special coating which allows it to absorb more liquid. Regular cardstock will buckle and tear, and you'll have bleeding of the colours. Tip number 2 is to use a tool like a sticky grid mat. This is a game changer and it will hold your stencils in place when you're colouring. It's so much easier. And I usually like to line my stencils up and work out where the image is going to be. Okay, so you're not sure if you like watercolouring or can do it. My next tip is for you. Did you know that you can use water-based inks as a watercolour? Simply smush them onto a palette or onto a plate, something non-porous, and then pick up some water with a brush, add it to the ink, pick it up on the end of the brush and paint it as you regularly would. Otherwise, you can invest if it's something that you do like. I like the intensity of the half pans, and they're really easy to use too because they are pre-mixed colours. If you're a confident colorist, then you might already have some watercolor tubes. If you do, you actually only need a few to create a huge color palette. If you know what colors to mix together, you can pretty much have any color of the rainbow. I personally like colors that are pre-mixed because it's easier, especially if you're doing larger areas. So you may have noticed that I'm doing something a little bit different here. My first layer of the card was splattered, and we'll come back to that shortly. But what I'd like to show you now is that you can actually paint directly through a stencil. So this is the base layer of the Mega Blossom. It's a 4-layered stencil. It's a beautiful big bloom. I've had a lot of fun with this already. And what I'm doing here is literally picking up the paint, or this is actually ink, on my brush and painting it through. I'm not adding a lot of water to this, so it will dry fairly quickly. So my next tip is to mask the areas that you don't want coloured. This is especially important for this technique that I'm doing here, where I'm splattering. So I'm literally picking up some paint, I'm mixing colours together, and I'm just using my finger on top of the brush to actually splatter the ink and the watercolours through the stencil. This is the second layer of the stencil, so I am actually adding darker colours and more of them just to try and give it a little bit more definition. But you'll see how I give it even more definition shortly. One thing to be careful of when you are masking, if you are using tape like I have done here, make sure it's very low tack. De-tack the tape before you put it on the cardstock, especially watercolor cardstock, as it is soft, and if you've already painted on it, you will find that it will have more of a tendency to lift the cardstock as you're peeling away the tape. Or just be very gentle. Use post-it notes. Even just a piece of scrap cardstock would work here as well. Tip number 5 is to allow plenty of drying time. One of the good things about creating 2 cards at the same time that are both watercolored means that as one is drying, I'm working on the other panel. It just gives me a little bit more time to let it dry and not be impatient and start colouring, because when I'm adding that next layer, I don't want it to bleed, especially on the image that I've done the splattering to. If I painted over that too soon, I would lose the effect of the splattering, and I want that to show through. So here again, I'm adding the next layer of the flower and adding darker colors each time, especially on this splattered version. So like I said, it's a 4-layer stencil for the flower. So the first 2 I did splattering, and for the next 2 layers I've done painting like I did through the other one, and that just gives this flower definition, but something a little bit different by having the splattering on those lighter edges of the flower. This is such a beautiful blossom, and I love that it comes with this big bold leaf and stem as well, but I also like that it is separate, so you can actually create the flower on its own or create it with the leaves. Lots of options. So I did exactly the same process for the leaves of the flowers on both of the panels. The splattered one, I used the splattering in the background and then just lightly painted over. I will list all the colours that I've used today in the associated blog post, which will be linked in the description of the video. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out and type them in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer them for you. And as promised, I have a bonus tip for you, and it's to be careful when you're choosing colours. Make sure you choose colours that mix well together, and if they're not the best together, then allow plenty of drying time between layers. If you're not sure, check on a colour wheel, or you can also practice on a piece of scrap cardstock. Just mix the colours that you've chosen together and you'll see exactly what colour they make. And hopefully it's not mud. One of the great things about using watercolour cardstock is that the press plates work beautifully on them. And I've got this awesome sentiment which says sending hugs. I just kind of worked out on the plate where it's going to sit and adhered my cardstock panel to the lid of the Better Press. If you don't have a press plate, then you could do a sentiment stamped on the actual cardstock. But if you have used a cardstock that is very textured, this might not be very easy to do. So make sure you either use a positioning tool so you can restamp, or stamp it on a separate piece of paper and die cut it out, or add a die cut sentiment instead. I did just that in my second example. Instead of actually stamping on the panel, I decided to use a brushed gold die cut word thanks, and I really like how this font looks. I did pop up my panel, so if you wanted to make it more post friendly, then you could easily add the panel directly to the card front, and I used some liquid glue just to adhere that die cut sentiment. I love that we can stretch our layering stencils. Instead of just ink blending through them, by watercoloring it gives you a totally different look. I've used the same layout, the same colors, but they actually look different, these cards, and I hope you really enjoyed them. If you want to let me know in the comments below if you're going to try this technique and perhaps which card is your favorite today. I would love to know. And if you've got a layering stencil set, maybe you might like to give it a try. I think a graphic design would look awesome in this style. Till next time, bye.
Hello there, did that video just spark your creativity? And do you want more project ideas and inspiration videos too? Well, if you do, please make sure that you subscribe to the Altenew YouTube channel. Also, make sure that you do click that notification bell so you don't miss a video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye bye.